Okay, hello everybody and welcome to another Sales Expert interview, and today I am joined by Craig Lowder. Craig, how you doing?
It's marvelous, John. It's getting close to the weekend and the weather is beautiful.
Yeah, and where are you today, Craig?
In Chicago. Just came back from the city meeting with a client. It's been a great day. Excellent.
And Craig is the founding member of Mainspring Sales Group, seasoned business veteran, more than 30 years experience helping small, mid-sized businesses achieve their sales goal. He also is the author of a book on sales strategy, correct?
That is correct. Smooth Selling Forever.
And Smooth Selling Forever is available on Amazon and all good online bookstores in multiple versions, and I really would encourage everybody to take a look at that. Okay, so that's the intro, Craig. Let's get straight into it. Sales strategy, when you mention it, and especially when you put strategy attached to anything, a lot of people kind of switch off because they think it's a bit of a nebulous term. So how would you define sales strategy? Because let's face it, they're the people who are the most skeptical about anything that's kind of has either process or strategy attached.
Great question. Sales strategy is part of an overall business plan, along with systems and people, are part of how any organization sells their products and services in order to increase their profits. Mm-hmm. Typically, sales strategy, as I've outlined in my book, I found 8 great components of a sales strategy. Right. Target markets and customer segments is 1. Buying influence and personas is 2. Your channel sales strategy is 3. Ensuring that you have a customer journey buying or selling process or processes in place is absolutely critical. Making sure that you have a sales message or value proposition that resonates with your target audience is absolutely critical. Having performance metrics to measure the activity and results that you're expecting to receive through your sales team is absolutely critical. Right. 5x5 growth strategies. What do we mean by that? How do you generate leads? What do you do to convert those leads? How do you increase the number of transactions? How do you go about increasing the average transaction size? And what can you do to increase your overall profit margins? And the 8th area is really using sales compensation to help drive the direction of your strategy within your sales team.
Great. So it sounds like to me, Craig, that there is a lot of work that needs to go into it before you sit down and finally formulate your strategy and present it to anyone, right? And we've become used to, I think, in a lot of organizations where, it's coming up near the end of the year, we better do our strategy meeting, or it's January, let's do our strategy meeting for the year, and people get into a room and sit down with very little prep work done, right? Maybe we'll dig up last year's strategy and see how close. Oh, look at that, we didn't come anywhere near it because we haven't looked at it since last year. So it sounds like from what you're saying that there is a lot of prep work that needs to go in terms of identifying your target market and all the other things you talked about. So would you say initially that your strategy, that it's the foundational work that really counts in the end?
Absolutely, because what I find in most businesses, John, is they're highly transactional or highly tactical, and they haven't really thought about anything other than I need to grow my revenues, and the question is, who do I talk to? How do I go about doing that is really an afterthought, and it's kind of on the fly, and you can't build predictable and sustainable results if you're doing things on the fly all the time. And getting back to the plan, yes, you need to have a plan, but it needs to be revisited on a regular basis and your strategy to make sure it's getting the kind of traction that you want your strategy to get. So strategy planning, it's a very, very iterative process. Once you develop it, you can constantly have to check back in to make sure it's generating the results you're seeking to achieve.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, especially about the dynamic and iterative process of a strategy, because like I said, I have seen in my own career so many times, literally the strategy getting dusted off from last year. And it's the only time it gets looked at. You go through a strategy meeting, you produce a lovely strategy, and then you look at it again the next year when you're producing the next lovely strategy. Okay, so say you've done all this foundational work and you've got a great strategy together and you've got all the components. How's the best way to communicate this strategy to your salespeople? Because again, you gather them all together in a room and say, I'm going to present our sales strategy for this year. You're going to get a lot of like bored looking faces, right?
Right. Well, two primary high-level ways. Number one, it needs to be documented. It needs to be written down, and whether it's a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation and or the signage, anything that you can do to reinforce what your strategy is to begin with, coupled along with on more of an oral or verbal basis in your weekly sales meetings, quarterly reviews, one-to-one meetings with each of your salespeople. You need to reinforce what that strategy is, and you need to make sure that you've got performance metrics that you're measuring and holding people accountable to in order to achieve that strategy.
So I think, and I love that idea. You got to have it documented, and you got to have it in everybody's hands. At some organizations that I used to run in the past, I used to actually try and get it onto one page, laminated, and actually send it to everybody in the company and say, this should be on your workspace, whether you're in the office or working at home. This should be staring you in the face. And if you can't identify what you're doing on a daily basis, if you can't figure out how it relates to that laminate that's on the wall, call me.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a lot like sales training, and you're facilitating change here, you're promoting change. Unless it's regularly reinforced, nothing changes. And it becomes nothing more than a piece of paper hanging on the wall.
Right. So let's talk about the reinforcement piece. So do you think today that a sales team and a sales strategy can be successful without leveraging technology such as a CRM or sales enablement tools to really embed that strategy and reinforce it on a daily basis?
If you don't mind losing, if you don't mind being highly inefficient and ineffective, sure, you can get by without it. But having a CRM system is absolutely critical to tracking the performance against your strategy and your overall sales plan.
So then why is it then that we continue to get this kind of, or a lot of people talk about the kind of resistance, and people are thinking, well, yeah, I know, I understand CRM and I understand sales enablement tools, but come on, like, I'm a sales guy. I should be free. I should be unencumbered. How do you overcome that piece?
Well, I think there's three things, and John, it really begins with the fact that the CRM system is not properly introduced to the sales team, because they think of it as Big Brother looking over their shoulder trying to catch them to do things wrong, as opposed to positioning this as a personal planning and productivity tool.
Right.
Where you're getting grassroots support for it. In addition to that, if there is a CRM system, it's not customized to support the sales processes and performance metrics that are driving success in the business. That's absolutely critical. Training in a lot of cases is lacking, and just like any other training, you can't introduce somebody, for example, to a new CRM system. You can't introduce them to Pipeliner, have an event, and go away.
Yep.
It needs to be in small chunks, and it needs to be reinforced, and people have to be held accountable for putting that information in there. But accountability to me is a stick. The real thing is, what's the carrot? The carrot gets down to, how does it benefit me as an individual, be successful as a single sales producer? How does it benefit me as a sales manager in achieving success and ensuring that all my people are successful?
Yeah.
It's a coaching and mentoring tool as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Which is, why we built the components into our system. But here's another one when it comes to salespeople, right? So you've got your sales strategy and you've got your technology. And in order for all of this to come together, you've got to have well-defined processes, right? So why is it that you often get a visceral reaction to the mere mention of process when it comes to sales?
I would say this, John. A lot of cases, companies have tried it before at a very high level, and it's been like a flavor of the week, and people haven't seen that it's actually helped them. But the reality, a lot of sales processes, if there are some, and I don't see it very often, I would say 99 out of the 100% of the companies that I work with, they don't have sales processes. But what's happened to that 1% that do it, it's the people in the corner office that are building the sales process.
Right.
And saying, here's what you do. I take the opposite approach. A sales process is really documenting the buying journey, and it's a series of best practices that only the people on the street know what should be done and how it should be done. So it's highly collaborative in that they're the ones putting the sales process together. Right. And at the end of the day, if they put it together, who owns it?
They own it. Absolutely.
They're more likely to execute it, and they're more likely to be aware of what's working and what's not working. And like a plan, the sales process is iterative. You need to review it on a regular basis to find ways to improve on it.
Well, again, I mean, I couldn't agree more, because obviously, as you said, you want to map it to the buying process of your journey and of your customer, rather. And as we know, the buying process and the buying journey continues to evolve. And it's changed a lot over the recent times as the buying behavior, consumer and B2B has all got mixed and mashed up together. So in your experience working with companies, what difference do you think it makes having a well-defined process like you talked about and well-defined and well-adopted? What success have you seen from that?
It's been huge, and it's one of the cornerstones that have served me well in over 3 decades of being on the client side as the head of sales and as well as a consultant. The results are many, but win rates go up, sales cycle shortened, transaction sizes go up, profit margins go up, the productivity of the sales team goes up, and selling costs go down, just as the primary ones that I see.
So, I mean, for anybody watching this, listening to this, I mean, real economic drivers, costs going down and everything else going up, the good things are going up. I mean, real economic return on well-defined sales process, well-adopted sales process.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think then, as you said, I mean, when you come across a lot of companies that don't have a sales process, is it they don't know what a sales process is, or they've maybe tried one years ago and then they just gave up because it was too hard, or they haven't gone through the right collaborative process that you talked about to produce one? Why is it lacking?
I believe at the very ground roots level, and I'm dealing with small and mid-sized companies, the owners of those companies are primarily technicians, as Michael Gerber outlines in his book, The E-Myth, and sales and marketing is not a core competency. And they've built their business based on intuition, the inherent ability that they've had, and they've never realized the value of putting together a sales process. And quite frankly, they don't know where to begin.
So where would you advise somebody to begin?
You begin by, at the very highest level, trying to identify how many sales processes there are in your organization. And what I've typically found in the small and mid-sized market, there's anywhere from 3 to 5, particularly dealing between new and existing customers or channel partners or getting additional business within existing accounts. And then taking it down from there. It's really understanding what the buyer journey is. So the starting point comes when an effective sales process is being built is put your customer hat on.
Right.
Pretend that you're the customer. What process would you go through in making a decision on the product or service category that you're providing solutions to? Now that you've done that, mirror the buying process. Make it easy for that company, that person to buy from you and make them think that you get them. Because you're always right with them. You're going down the road, same path at the same speed, and that person says, this person gets me. They understand what I'm thinking and where I'm going next. So it becomes highly collaborative. And as being highly collaborative, it becomes successful.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point as well, because I don't think companies do enough of not just putting on the buyer or the customer's hat, but also actually talking to the customers. I had one very interesting experience many years ago when I took over an organization, and one of the first things I did is I went out and I talked to existing customers, and they said, oh, we love your products and your services, and you guys do a great job. You're just really hard to do business with. And so and I was like, what? And this was one of those crazy situations where people wanted the products and services and they liked the outcomes that they got. They just actually found the buying process to be a difficult one. So they were like saying, God, can you make it easy to buy for you? And then when you took a step back inside and you looked at our process, we were saying, wow, they're right. These people are coming to us, they want to buy from us, and we're trying our best not to sell to them.
Absolutely true. More times than not, I'll say the challenge is that most companies don't think about asking their customers. Mm-hmm. If you give them the permission to be candid with you and you ask them, what do they like about doing business with you, and to more effectively serve them, what would they change? They will tell you volumes of information that helps you refine your sales processes, your performance metrics, your sales strategy, your product or service offerings, etc.
Yeah, so why do you think more companies don't go and talk to their customers enough and ask them about their buying experiences, or even if the way that they buy now is starting to change? I mean, you can always ask them also about other things that they buy and say, are you going through the same process now, or is it a different process? Why do you think that slips through the cracks a lot?
They don't think about it because, as I said earlier, the businesses are very highly transactional. Mm-hmm. They're looking to close the next sale, and they're not taking a strategic view of their business. Although if you ask them, do you think your customers can give you valuable information? The answer is, yeah, we can. Well, why aren't you doing it? And the answer is usually, well, that's a good point. Yeah, we just haven't thought about it.
Right, and that's why I think it's one of the easiest things, because I mean, when I used to do a lot of speaking and presentations, and I would talk about being buyer focused and the buyer journey and all of that, people would say, oh, how can we start to learn about this? And I'd say it's the simplest thing in the world. Pick up the phone to some of your best customers. Start with them, because they're the ones who will immediately tell you. And then the next customer you land, your newest customer, ask them, because then you might discover that their buying process is actually different than you expected.
Well, and that's a great purpose for CRM systems too.
Absolutely.
Win-loss reports on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing what you can learn by just asking the question, making the time.
Yeah, I know. I agree. That's one of the things that we built into Pipeline or CRM was the archive, where you can look at where deals died, right? What stage of the process they did. And you can do an analysis on it, because you can do it at an individual, group, or whatever level you want. But the good thing is you can suddenly see, you could take an individual and you could go, ooh, look at John. He seems to be really good in the early stages of opening. But later on, when it gets to the negotiation stage, it all seems to fall down a bit. So I wonder if he's got a problem there. Or you look at the team and you go, wow, a lot of people seem to have a problem at the presentation stage. Maybe there's something we can do there. But I agree with you. I mean, you've got the opportunity to do real analysis. You should be taking that opportunity.
Totally agree with you. And one of the things that I do with my clients is look very closely at conversion rates
mm-hmm.
from one stage to the next stage in the selling process. Because if you're not successful, a couple things are happening. Number one, you're not targeting well at the top of the funnel. Or B, you're not executing your sales process correctly, assuming that you have the sales process, which really gets back into the training element, John.
Right.
I get questions all the time, well, what training methodology do you teach? And it's like, well, and I don't want to mention names, but I've been trained or certified and have taught them or used a half a dozen of them.
Right.
And where I go back to is that the reality, what's most important to you, I believe, is executing your sales process correctly. Is that
mm-hmm.
correct? Yes. So what I end up doing is I end up picking and choosing based on where they're at in the sales process. It may be from one methodology from one organization, another methodology from a different organization that melds itself, quite frankly, to ensure that each individual has the ability to successfully implement or execute each step in the sales process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And with my background, obviously, I ran Huthwaite for a time, and we, sold the spin methodology. But I used to often say to, prospects, I'd say, listen, whether you choose us or you choose Miller Hyman or somebody else at the time, I said, for me, as long as you choose someone and you implement it and you reinforce it, things will get better for you. But you can buy any of us, and you can train us and then leave it and then not reinforce it, and it's not going to make any difference. Because you mentioned training a number of times, let's just come back to that for a moment before we finish up. Because, I was in sales training and performance improvement for a long time, and people used to say to me, "Oh, that must be really easy because like everybody wants to get better, and especially sales training because it helps increase revenue." And I used to say, well, if you lined up 100 CEOs of small, mid, and large-sized companies, and you said, how many of you believe in the power of training? I said, I guarantee you 100% of them would put their hands up. Now, if you followed that up with, how many of you are going to spend a significant amount of your budget on training this year? Yeah, you might get 10 if you're lucky. And I said, so there's that disconnect. So why do you think that is? Because you've mentioned training a number of times. Why do you think people are, while they all believe in the concept of it, are slow to commit the dollars to doing it?
I don't think that they really understand the value, and or they've had experience that's gone bad on them. Mm-hmm. And I would say, because one of the things I do is a sales operations audit, I've only had one company in the last 3 years that actually said that they've had a sales training budget. And unfortunately, they treat sales training as an event.
Yes.
Training is a way of life. It needs to be coached and mentored to on an ongoing basis. You have to have rigor and discipline around execution of your sales process and leveraging what you've learned in sales training. And quite frankly, most companies don't do that. Mm-hmm. And part of the problem stems back to what we said earlier. It's transactional in nature. The best salesperson gets promoted to sales manager.
Right.
They end up becoming the closer. So salespeople flush up the pheasants, somebody goes in, and the sales manager closes the sale. As opposed to, I firmly believe that the sales manager's primary responsibility is to develop their sales team so that everybody on the sales team can make their quotas.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that does not happen.
Yeah, because you think about it, the equation is quite simple, right? And the math equation is quite simple, right? If the sales manager becomes the super closer, maybe he can get a number of deals over the line. Cool, you've got some revenue there. But if he coaches and mentors and he helps improve all of his sales team, or even 75% of them, the incremental addition in revenue is going to far outstrip the few deals he can muscle over the line, right?
Absolutely. And I find that superstars on the sales side are egocentric. Mm-hmm. And they love to be able to close the deal and do everything that everybody else can't do.
Yeah.
And it's just like a superstar professional athlete. How many superstar professional athletes become good coaches?
Exactly.
It doesn't matter the sport. And I use it living here in Chicago. Michael Jordan says to me, you do this. You leave about 2 feet behind the free throw line, you leap in the air, and you dunk it one-handed. And I go, wait a minute. I'm old. I'm short. I don't have any leaps. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm a firm believer that, unfortunately, that a lot of the best salespeople are the ones who get promoted, and they're not the best ones to teach your salespeople, because a lot of what they do is intuitive to them. They naturally do it, and because they're egocentric, they don't really want to teach the other guys and gals to do things as well as they do.
Yeah, we used to call it unconsciously competent.
Yes,
so they're really good, but they have no idea why. All right. Well, listen, this has been great. So what I want you to do is look into your crystal ball a little bit here and tell me, how do you think sales is going to evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? What changes are we going to see?
Well, as the trends have started 5 to 10 years ago, because of the digital world, buyers are getting harder and harder to get to, which means that if you're successful in getting an audience with a prospect or a customer, you better have a well-tuned message. And what I see is there's going to be exponential growth in the areas of data mining, data slicing. So whether it's a CRM system, marketing automation tool, predictive analytics, the use of LinkedIn, or for goodness sakes, even something like Crystal knows that when you actually get somebody on the phone or face-to-face, your message is really targeted towards that individual.
Right.
So I think the biggest thing is recognition. It's going to be harder to get in front of people because there's so much information available digitally, and that when you do get in front of somebody, you've got to understand how and why people buy, and that really gets down to data mining and slicing and data analytics, predictive analytics.
Excellent. Good thoughts. Okay, Craig, this is Craig Lowder. So why don't you tell everybody how they can contact you and where they can find you?
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I'm in Chicago. I'm the founder of a company called Mainspring Sales Group. My email address is clowder, CLOWDER, at Mainspring, MAINSPRING, sales.com. Or you can call me directly. My cell phone number is 630-649-4943.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Craig. This was very insightful, good conversation, as I expected it would be. My name is John Golden. This is Sales Expert Interviews, brought to you by SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM. And again, I'd like to thank Craig for joining us today and providing such great insights. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you for the honor, John.